Welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. This podcast is designed to provide momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. Whether you're a pastor, youth leader, ministry volunteer, parent, or student, we want to be your go-to and most trusted resource for equipping and encouragement when it comes to your ministry and leadership influence. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. My name is Eric Miller. I am the host of this podcast, and we are so delighted that you joined us for another conversation today. We have with us the one and only Brittany Richmond. Brittany, thank you for joining.
I'm thrilled to be here. Let's get it.
Yeah. I love, we've chatted both through Instagram and through, we did a Zoom call a while ago, and I loved getting to hear your story and just all the things about you. So I'll briefly introduce you and fill in any gaps as I go. So I pulled some of this off your website, BrittanyRichmond.com. Go check that out. But Brittany is a teen mental health speaker, anxiety expert. I see you're an author now here soon. Your book
Yikes.
We'll add that to the bio. Do I get to be the first one to announce that?
Yes, you do.
Yay, check it out. All right. So your bio that you sent us right after high school, Brittany was diagnosed with multiple anxiety disorders, including impulse control disorder, which led you into the field of counseling and psychology. Brittany, I've listened to a few of your other podcasts that you've done and where you've shared your story. And I saw that you were a school counselor for a while. And then from there, you kind of made it your mission to not only end the stigma of mental health, but your phrase, hug as many people that are hurting. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So fill us in.
People.
Yeah. What did I miss?
You nailed it. I'm super awkward. Talking about myself is something I'm working on. So I work very well with direct questioning, but because oftentimes when people ask, like, tell me about yourself, I never know what they want to hear, right? And I just really struggle with it. So fill in the gaps just a little bit, I guess. Yes, I was a school counselor for many years, and then I stepped into the world of public speaking professionally about 5 years ago because I had always been blessed with the gift of public speaking, even through anxiety. I struggle with one-on-one conversations, but in front of large crowds, it's like that's just my purpose. And that's one of the reasons I feel it is my purpose. People ask all the time, like, how do you get on stage in front of all these people if you live with anxiety? Like, I don't, and I would never do that, and it's like, well, I feel like that's something God has called me to do, is stand in front of people. And it wasn't until he put it on my heart to really start speaking to young people, because we are most powerfully positioned to serve the people we once were. And who I was a teenager suffering from anxiety. And, and in the world we live in today, it's a conversation that we need to continue to have. And I feel like teenagers want to have it. They just don't know how. So if one person can stand in front of them and make them feel not alone, then that's what I'm going to do. So that's why we're here. So here we are.
I love it. Well, I did see on one of your other episodes that you had done that you like direct questions. So I have a few rapid fire questions for you to get to know you a little bit better for our audience. You game?
Let's do it.
If you're watching this on YouTube, I did not tell her I was going to do this. So they're not hard.
I'm a little nervous. Here we
go. We'll have fun with it. You have to laugh when you're going to talk about mental health, right? Come on. All right. Want to start with an easy one? Let's start with a real easy one. I only have a couple. All right. Ready?
Just fire away.
Lifetime supply of anything you want. What would it be?
Pizza.
Yes. That's a great answer.
Always pizza.
That is great. All right. What's a song right now that lives rent-free in your head?
Runaway by Bon Jovi. I don't know why. I've had it on repeat for like the last 24 hours. Like I'm literally, it was on before I jumped on this call. I'm like, I don't know why I'm obsessed with this right now. Like I'm obsessed. So just a thing.
All right. Okay. You're an old soul. I like it. How about this one? Favorite movie of all time?
The Breakfast Club.
Nice.
In the background.
I figured you would say that.
Or, yeah. I mean, truly, you could say Back to the Future. It's also on the wall. So either way, either one, depending on the vibe. So,
why Breakfast Club? I feel like there's a reason.
I feel like it's just, I see myself in all those characters and I'm just like, I connect with them so serious. It's a huge part of when I talk to teenagers. I reference the movie. I write about it in my book. It's just, it's so relatable. It's unreal. So I just love it. So
perfect. All right. Two more. What's your life verse or favorite verse?
Oh gosh. I feel like, again, it's just the vibe. It's the energy. You know, I saw this. It's not I guess it is a quote that's a biblical quote, but I saw something the other day that was like, there's one phrase repeated in the Bible 365 times and it's do not be afraid. And I was like, interesting. So I'm going to go with that one. Do not be afraid. Oh no. Eric, did I lose you? Eric!
I lost you. I don't know what happened. Now I
lost you. Okay.
Weird.
You froze on me for a second.
You did too. You were like,
oh no!
I didn't hear your verse.
Okay. So I'll repeat it. Don't worry. Because I wanted to I will tell you, it's a saying. Okay. So I saw something the other day that said, there's one, and it's written on my calendar. That's why I'm looking up here. But there's one phrase repeated in the Bible 365 times, and it's do not be afraid. So I feel like that, just in general, that whole do not be afraid is really pressed on us. And I think that just in my life, I think there's moments we feel fear, but we should lean into that and have faith that it's going to work out because we can lean on the Lord. So I just feel like the whole theme of my life is just feel the fear and do it anyway. So it just seems appropriate. So
that's awesome. I like that. All right. Last one. Maybe the most challenging. Top 3 apps that you use on your phone.
Oh gosh. Instagram, obviously. I feel like I'm all over that app.
Okay.
Spotify, because they got to have my music, my 80s hair bands, obviously. And what else? Oh gosh, I don't know. Hold on, give me 2 seconds. I'm like, what other apps do I use? Oh, probably the Starbucks app. That's pretty relevant. So we'll go with that. All right.
Good work. You did it. You got through the rapid fire questions.
Now
our audience knows a little bit about you. Go follow Brittany on Instagram. You won't regret it. So, all right, you ready? Let's dive into our topic here. As we think through how do we make sense of mental and emotional health. Brittany, I feel like there's multiple sides to this discussion. So for people who maybe are they think they know all about this, or maybe they really are just kind of diving in, how would you define mental health? And what kind of things would you put under would you identify maybe under that umbrella?
Well, I think mental health in itself is in the word that it's something that we constantly have to work on. It's just like our physical health. I think we often kind of separate the two, where we think oh, mental health bad, physical health good. We're always working on our physical health, right? Whether it's working out, eating right, sleeping well, self-care, all the things that's acceptable. But when you talk about working on your mental health, people are kind of resistant and hesitant to that. But if we keep them both in the same category and overall health, right? I mean, we include it in mental, physical, spiritual, financial, all the different components to create this happy, healthy human, not this perfect human, but this one that can, go about their day on and stay well is what I say, stay well. So I think that keeping it on the same level as physical health is really important, which I think is part of ending the stigma But how we go about physical health, all of us, is going to look differently. Ergo, how we go about our mental health is going to look differently. Not everybody is going to, attribute self-care days like working out to their mental health or reading to their mental health. Sometimes it looks like setting boundaries or pouring into our faith, or it's just going to look different for each person. So as we work through this as a society as to what it means to work on our mental health, I just think we have to give each other grace in that process too, and understand that how you go about it may not be how I go about it, and that's okay. So the grace factor. I think I went off on a tangent there. I really hope I answered that question. So this happens a lot. So
You did.
I'm sorry.
It's so two parts, right? And forgive me, I threw two things at you at the same time. So that's a good definition. What would be things that categorically you would put under the theme or the umbrella of mental health?
Oh gosh, it's a huge umbrella, like a huge umbrella. Oh gosh. Honestly, I would put all the things under there. Working on balancing spiritual, financial, relationships, physical. And I'm sorry, I said the word balance. I don't believe in that. I believe in harmony. I think that things can coexist at different levels better than trying to keep them all like on this equal plane, because I don't think we'll ever reach that. But harmony can be reached, obviously, because that, insinuates that things can fluctuate and we still feel good about it. But really just not prioritizing yourself as an alone entity. And what I mean by that is I think we have this narrative in society where we have to go about it alone and that we need to power through, and realizing that really the key to mental health, in my opinion, is realizing that it's a team effort. And by the team effort, I do believe that the Lord is absolutely on our side with this, and keeping him at the center of that, but also realizing that people are put in our life and things are put in our life to also help us move through that, like family counselors, potentially when people need help through medication and things like that. Like, things are put in our life to build that team effort towards, strong mental health. It's not just us and us alone, which I think is one of the things that we all struggle with, especially young people, is trusting other people, or, no one will understand how I'm feeling, so I'm not going to talk about it, or, just people will judge me. There's a lot of resistance, and it really builds that narrative of that I feel the enemy puts out there of go about it alone, like go through it alone, power through it alone, when it's not an alone effort. And I think we need to understand that. So
yeah,
I rambled again.
No, I like that a lot, because I think you're right. When you think about like how everything is connected, that's by God's design. And yet, like, when you read the whole of Scripture, you can see that, like, in Ephesians 6, I'm thinking of, like, it says, like, clearly our battle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the rulers, the authorities in this dark world. Like you were just saying, like that whole thing takes place in our mind. And so when you think about mental health, it is so key to understand the mindset that we have, our perspective. And I know you do a lot about like negative self-talk and things that trigger anxiety and then even can cause depression. And so, Brittany, like, share with us a little bit about like your role, like what things are you doing right now in your job as a speaker and getting to travel to help combat some of those things for students?
Well, the first key factor is just learning how to have those non-intrusive conversations around mental health, because I think we get very guarded. And I really like the reference of when we approach people and we're like, how are you doing? And your initial response is, I'm fine. How are you? But that's a very like closed off question, right? They're not curious questions. So teaching teenagers how to open a door with conversation, create space for each other, and not just talk, but actively listen, right? How do we actively listen to our peers and those around us so we can provide space for them, and hold space for them? I think that's really important and something that is a skill that needs to be worked on. And, not everybody's well versed in that. But again, if you can give the tools on how to start doing that, how to start having those non-intrusive conversations, it's very helpful for them. And then, of course, like learning learning flipping the script in your mind that you are in more control than you realize. I think that's what mental health struggles do, is they seek to isolate us, hence to be very alone in the struggle. But we're not, right? Like really, really identifying the control factor, even controlling the fact that we do have control over how we respond to the negative self-talk. We may not always be able to control the negative self-talk, but we can control how we respond to it. That's a choice. So, and choice equals control, less anxiety. So like there's this nice little ripple effect, right? This snowball effect that can occur when we put these things in place, but also identifying and prioritizing joy and leaning into behaviors that are healthy and that serve us. I'm very, very, I like to draw the line in the sand with that, because the things that bring us joy are not always healthy and serve us, right? We talk about instant gratification. We talk about, sometimes the things that are fun and exciting are, not of the Lord. And again, we're not perfect people. And I'm not saying you have to actively go out there and be a perfect person. I'm just saying that always asking yourself, like, is this healthy and does it serve me? And what that means is, does this move me forward spiritually, financially, physically, mentally, and emotionally? And if it's not a yes, it's a no. I mean, it's just a really, there's really no gray area with that if it's healthy and if it serves you. So really kind of teaching them that whole mindset and how to prioritize those things in life. Because I think as we grow as adults, and become adults, whatever that is we start to see this gap just widen between what brings us joy and our responsibilities. We have less time for ourselves, less time to pour into ourselves, the people we love, because responsibilities and stress increases. But if we prioritize, identify, prioritize, and execute on the things that really do bring us joy, whether it's pouring into your faith, your family, just constantly living those things that bring you joy, then, we have less stress and anxiety throughout our life. So kind of viewing and reframing what they already know. They know they have negative self-talk. They know they feel alone. Let's just reframe it so they can start thinking about it differently. So.
Awesome. Brittany, who are some of the target audiences that you get to be in front of? Like, I know you're saying you work primarily with students, helping them understand all of that, but who are the groups that you usually work with?
Student leaders, particularly the high school age. So I would say 13 to 18 is pretty wide range. I do some college, some younger. But I like to focus on the student leader because that's who I was. And I truly feel like this is the student that falls through the cracks. So let me explain. So as a counselor, we were all, most of the time we were sent the at-risk student, the one that exudes, risky behavior. They're not getting good grades in school. Maybe their home life is a bit of a struggle, like things we know about them. They need extra support, makes total sense. Absolutely. But what I was the student that, excelling was part of overcoming the anxiety, right? It was part of dealing with the anxiety and making sure I was constantly masking my shortcomings, or so I didn't feel like I wasn't good enough, or and I had this overwhelming fear of failure. All of these just this weight that I hear from these students that are excelling. And the reason I feel like these are the students that fall through the cracks is because they walk the halls every day, or they're with their, teachers or leaders. And you look at them and you're like, they're good. They're great. I'm going to give them more responsibility. They're excelling. They're leaders. But we don't know what's really going on, underneath, and where that excel comes from, and if it's something we need to check in on. And I was fortunate enough to give assembly at my former high school, and the teachers, I graduated in 2005, but it's a small school. So all of the teachers there were my teachers still. So it was wild, Eric. It's like having this conversation in front of them that they didn't know. Wild. So, after the students left, one of my teachers came up to me with tears in her eyes, and she hugged me and she's like, I had no idea. And she's like, thank you for the reminder that I have to check in on my students that seemingly have it all together. And I was like, yeah, because none of us do. Right. So that's why I feel student leaders are the ones that fall through the cracks and need extra support. So yeah, that's why.
Brittany, would you be willing to share a little bit about your process in overcoming, and maybe even some of those, the disorders that you have and things that you've had to fight through?
Yeah. So, I've always been I was raised in the church. I've always had a relationship with God, but I think it's I wouldn't say it's common because I don't want to speak for people, but I've seen, that we get into our teens and our 20s and we're like, I got this. Like, I don't need to, do all the things. I'm good. And so I was coping with things very much on my own. And that looked very much like risky behaviors and, that instant gratification that gives you that dopamine effect where you feel good in the moment and things are fine. So you feel like you're just living for YOLO and, things are fine. And I never, for the record, the Lord never left my side. I stumbled on that walk with him, but he never leaves. Right. And, I'm like emotional thinking about it because like, it's so true. Like we look back at these moments at some of my lowest moments and I was like, he was there the whole time and I knew it, you always know it, but like, it's almost like you don't want to admit it because you don't want to admit that you're struggling and that you're a sinner. Like you just don't want to admit these things to yourself, let alone to him, even though he knows, and all the things. So, after high school, I mean, I in high school was really in the throes of it. I just was like pretending to be someone I wasn't. I did things because I wanted people to like me. I wanted to fit in, which is weird because we pretend to be someone we're not, so we'll be liked. But are we really liked for who we are because we're pretending to be someone? It's like this vicious cycle. Yep. And so after high school, I went to college. I dropped out of college twice because of my anxiety. So I'm a 2-time college dropout. You can still get a degree. I have a master's degree. So if you're listening to this, you're not a failure. Things happen in life, right? Things happen. But I was diagnosed with multiple anxiety disorders, including an impulse control disorder called trichotillomania. Funny name, not a funny disorder. It's where you pull your hair out in response to anxiety. And that impulse control bled over into other things and other actions that I've done that I've hurt myself and other people in this process. And I say all that because I do believe that ownership and accepting myself for who I was really important to moving forward. I believe in the power of and, where you can love and accept yourself for all of your faults in the moment and work to become a better version of yourself every day. 1%, 1 degree of glory at a time is what my pastor says. Like, just 1% better every single day is what we should strive for versus like you flip the switch and try to be this perfect person. It's just not, it's not possible. We're not Jesus, right? Like we strive to be in his image and all the things, but, and recognize and learning self-forgiveness was really important for me too. I carry a lot of shame and guilt for things that I've done, but he reminds me all the time that he nailed all of my guilt and shame to the cross, and just learning how to do better and pour into other people. And what I went through brought me to this point. So yeah.
Yeah. It's hard perspective sometimes to shift to realize like I can be thankful for the trials and the tests that God has taken me through. And you're so right. Like in those moments, that you're not alone, but you feel so alone. And so I think when it comes to like mental health, are you seeing in all the students that you work with, are you seeing students that many of them, they think they understand mental health. They're like, yeah, I have panic attacks and I'm fighting anxiety. Are they able to speak to that? Or is it something that they feel like they don't know a lot about? I think like what I'm seeing, it's kind of funny. I think of like when my mom first learned of like WebMD, and she was like Google searching and on WebMD, and she's like, I have this weird like thing that I've been fighting and it's a cough. And I'm like, Mom, you just have a cold. And she's like, no, I found on WebMD symptoms are that. It feels like now that students have all these like things at their disposal, the internet, they're on TikTok, they're understanding what mental health is maybe now. Where do you see that range, and how do you help students actually like get to the heart of the issue?
It's a little, I feel like I have so many things to say on this because I feel like the only way I can say this without sounding like I don't understand, so I really hope nobody takes this negatively, but part of me wonders if it's a trend. And what I mean by that is I feel like because students often feel alone, or students, young people in general, often feel alone, they go to social media to connect. They find they have a connection with this person. Ergo, I must also struggle with this. And then they start to take on that identity so they don't feel alone. And I see that in a lot of different ways, not just mental health. But I think we've always done that. I just think we see it more because social media makes it just so much easier for us to do that. Right. But yeah, so I say that now. I like to let students know and teenagers know, even adults and everybody know, that anxiety is normal. Okay. Like things like even depression is normal. These are normal human emotions. Now, when they get to a point where they interfere with your ability to function as a normal, right, a neurotypical human, or you have fight or flight responses when you are not in danger that last all day long, or, they cripple you to the point where you can't get out of bed, then we start to see issues, right? So I've always just been a huge advocate of counseling. That's obviously where my background is from. And it blows my mind there's still stigma attached to that. But this is the solution to connect. Where we see a lot of young people self-diagnosing things that we shouldn't be self-diagnosing, right? Like we should actually be going and visiting and understanding and having these third-party conversations. And it's ironic that they feel like no one understands them when there's professionals out there that absolutely do, right? So there's a lot of irony with that. Even in the church, there's some great counselors in the church system. I know my church has licensed clinical and mental health professionals that are also biblical counselors. So just really kind of finding, and I understand like building those relationships takes a lot. I went through a lot of counselors before I found someone that I trusted or had a lot of conversations. But again, that's how do we talk about mental health? If we have that conversation once and it doesn't work out the way we want it to, we don't stop. We have to keep going, right? It's like dating or finding a partner in life. Like you don't just, some people find the first one, right? And then they last forever. But the reality is that you have to get to know people and understand that the relationships you build in that space are just that, they're relationships. But yeah, so I like to let them know it's normal to feel this way. I like to let them know that they're just struggling through a phase of life, but they deal with a lot of things now that we didn't deal with, like social media and the constant comparisons. And so we have to give grace on that side as well. I think the older generations are very much like, still like power through and rub some dirt in it, you'll be fine. And there's some truth to that. We have to help them become resilient, but they don't know how. So how can we expect it of them when we learned in different ways? We did fall down and get back up multiple times, but they're falling and nobody's helping them up because they're dealing with things we don't necessarily know how to deal with because we didn't. So it's like, how do we help them learn to get back up so they can start to build their own resiliency? But I think that's one of the reasons I really like to live my life out loud, especially on social media, is because I want them to understand the power of and. I think we get stuck, right, in this mental space, especially young people, but it's not always their fault because neurologically their brain hasn't developed yet to where they can see big picture. That doesn't even get developed till your early 20s. So it's like we have to give grace on that side too. They're not capable of understanding just yet. But if we can model this behavior of, hey, I live with these things and, have a happy life, and do these things, like that, there's so much power in that to help them reframe their mindset. So again, I rambled. I'm so sorry.
No, I love what you just said. And I'd like you to go a little deeper on that. Like when we're trying as adults in these students' lives to model that for them. Many of our listeners on this podcast are parents or pastors. What does that look like? How do you model to the students in your life that and like I'm struggling with this and God is good without like really going into all of your details? Because for maybe a youth pastor, it's probably not appropriate for him to tell a student like, hey, my marriage is falling apart and I'm dealing with crippling anxiety because of it. Like what does that process look like? What do you recommend for those people who are in those positions?
Right. I do believe in boundaries. Obviously, I think that boundaries are really important in those types of relationships. But I do think there is a place for vulnerability. I think that young people so desperately want to be seen and understood. And that's one reason I stepped away from counseling, was because you can't talk about those things, right? You can't talk about your own mental health struggles as a licensed mental health professional with clients or patients, even those of people that personally. You just can't do it. But I wanted to do it because I saw, and I did do it. I went rogue a little bit, but it was because I connected, and I saw the difference in connection. And I think they appreciate that. They want to know that it's not adult me, like always like, best, like you're awesome, like good for you. Like I'll never live up to that expectation. I'll never be good enough for you. But the reality is, if we can just maybe relate, and it doesn't have to be what's happening in your life now, but even just sitting with them. And sometimes teenagers just want to be heard. We don't need to give advice. We don't need to tell them, oh, me too, because there's so much power in just letting people talk and letting them feel heard and seen and creating that safe space. But I do think there's a place for vulnerability.
Yes. One of my favorite phrases is vulnerability breeds vulnerability. And I think for us as adults, when you're able to be vulnerable in the right context with a student, to say, hey, I understand feeling lonely. I've been through that myself, and move it back to them. Like you can do those things in a way where you don't have to share all the gory details or whatever. But I love that. I think that's a really good insight, perspective of helping them understand that. And that's a big deal. So
yeah. And I see how that can be difficult, especially in the church with pastors, right? Especially in a leadership position in general, how it can be difficult. But I mean, putting yourself in the trenches there's so much power in that. Like there's so much power in that. And it keeps us humble also, right? And I so value leading by example. Some of my absolute favorite mentors are the ones that tell me about the struggle, right? Because then I don't feel like what I'm doing, I'm not alone in it. Like, oh, they've been through this, they've made it to the other side, we're good. Like, I'm gonna keep going. But connection and human connection is so critical. I mean, it's just, again, there's so much opportunity, especially people who've been blessed with leadership opportunities. You have so much opportunity. Like that's just the word, so much opportunity to change a life just by listening or sharing or, just being in that space. I mean, praying about it. Absolutely. And making sure it's what you should be doing. But I think that learning by Jesus's example alone, I mean, the man put himself in the trenches all the time, right? And led with that example. And I think that leading with that example is powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. So Brittany, I want to kind of take a slight turn in our direction here a little bit. In all your working with students, why do you think that mental health has become such a tough topic for some to talk about, usually in the church, and for others, why, for maybe the students, like we talked about a minute ago, like, why is it so easy for them to talk about? What's the gap there? What are you seeing?
I mean, there's so many variables. I think it's so hard to pinpoint just like even one or two, even just a few. It's so hard to pinpoint. But just in general, I think just the overwhelming fear of being judged and fear of people not understanding. I mean, because I think, again, I think back, and even now I'm still having conversations with my mom about certain like actual in detail. I'm like, how did you not know? And she's like, well, because we didn't talk about it. Like, how was I supposed to know? We just thought you were just a struggling teenager, like normal, So I think we just have to keep the dialogue open and also give grace on the other side. And I think this is something I remind of my teenagers is you need to run away from that impulse of feeling judged because you want to talk about your mental health and just talk about it. Like we want to end the stigma so badly, but nobody's talking about it that says that, it's like, we need to end the stigma. Okay. So start talking, let's start having these conversations and let's see how plays out, because the loud voices are the ones that get heard, and yeah. And I think that can cause conflict, and I think that can cause a lot of tension sometimes, but there is no influence without conflict. Like there isn't. So it's like, how do we consistently create change?
Yep. That I love that you mentioned your mom, because I think for older generations, they didn't talk about it. She's right. Like there was a stigma towards talking about mental health. They didn't ask. They didn't want to know. It was I'm going to be tough and whatever. Like there is that, and I see that with a lot of adults. But what I would encourage adults to realize and hear what Brittany is saying here is like, the students are talking about it. The students are learning about it. The students are researching and trying to make sense of it. So ask them. I love what you said earlier. Be curious, ask good questions.
Mm-hmm.
They will open up and share with you about it. They're longing for someone to ask. So adults, sometimes maybe we just need to be the one to ask, to genuinely care, and then to listen, All right, Brittany, a couple more questions here for you. Thoughts on that? You look like you were going to say something.
Yeah. So just to encourage adults, I think like a really powerful question that I work with in my talks with students and adults is just 3 words. Tell me more. I just have them repeat that. When you ask a student about their day and they said, "Oh, it was great. Tell me more. Oh, it was good. Tell me more." You're opening a door. Just keep repeating it. They will consistently keep diving into that. In fact, I did that with a talk with a student leadership group, and I got an email a few weeks later from one of the adult advisors. And she was like, "I started doing this in my marriage, and it just changed everything." Like just 3 words. Tell me more. It's like you want to know, you're creating space, but you're also opening a door. It's a non-intrusive question, because then it's just free talk, And I think too, adults, yes, start talking and having questions. Give yourself grace. No one's asking you to understand. They're just asking you to listen. And as far as young people, even the adults that want to talk about their mental health, I think we struggle because we want people to understand, but people don't have to understand in order to help you. I think that is a mental block also. So this is a 2-way road, friends. It is not you against them. It's not, trying to figure this out. Grace has to be given on all sides. So to have the conversations around mental health, do not expect other people to understand. I don't want my husband to understand what it's like to feel how I feel. He doesn't have to understand to support, love, and help me, period. I mean, that's something that we need to let go of, that expectation. So.
Yep. That's really good. All right. What are some factors that you see that play into the anxiety, the mental health issues in our students today?
Well, I think we can all agree social media is a huge factor. Yes. But, I hear this all the time from adults, especially parents. They're like, oh, their devices, are really, TikTok, Instagram, social media, everything's. And I just like to point out, and I don't do this to be negative, but I'm like, we put, as in we as the adults collective, I'm not pointing fingers, we put those devices in their hands, for the record. So ownership needs to be had on this side. Okay. I just want to be clear on that. Again, this is a 2-way road. This is a 2-way road. So we can't just blame social media and blame our kids for being on that. We put the devices there. They're just adapting to the world that we have created for them. Okay. So how can we meet them where they are? So what I mean by that is, if they're on social media and they're connected to that, how can we put positive influences in front of them? How can we put the things that they need to see in front of them? How can we meet them where they are and communicate on their level? Because they're not going to revert and do it the way we did it. Stop telling them to do it. It's not going to happen. So let's try to meet them where they are. So I do think that there's a little bit of a disconnect in that level of communication. So I hate to blame social media. Like collectively, society as a whole is failing young people on that front. But we can change the narrative. I want to be very clear. We can change the narrative. I do think that We just live in a world where everything is so much more easily accessible. And I think the internet has created that, and that's great. There's a lot of positives and benefits to that. But again, it doesn't allow us to take time to process things mentally and emotionally. We're very reactive as a society, mentally and emotionally. So there's not a whole lot of resiliency being built in a lot of things. So really working with each other to build that resiliency, I think, is important too. And also, we took God out of the schools. We took God out of the homes. We're seeing a direct correlation with, lack of faith in people's lives and the way that we're seeing. So I think that leaning into faith, and to be honest with you, Eric, the church I was at when I was young did not do me well, right? So I'm not blaming that whole aspect, but I think that there's some work to be done to bring young people into their relationship with God, and leaning into that. It's a relationship with God. It's not you and the church in a relationship. It's you and the Lord. And I think that needs work as well. So
I agree, applaud, amen, all of that. I completely agree. And to those of you who are listening to this, Momentum has all kinds of podcast episodes on this in the past, of dangers and boundaries in social media, and how do you help your kids with the tech side. And Brittany is absolutely spot on. We've talked about how this thing, your cell phone, is it's got to be like a vehicle that you learn to operate, just like getting a car. And you have to take courses and you put boundaries in place, because it's a dangerous vehicle that you're operating. Your cell phone should be that as well. And we should treat it that way. Oh, man. Brittany, what about like the mental, the negative talk? I know so many students they're their own worst critic. They're so hard on themselves. They feel that pressure that maybe we as adults or parents or teachers put on them. And so they just beat themselves up. What do you say to those students? How do you encourage them?
Wow. My first question is, why don't we give ourselves the love that we so freely give to other people? Like, I don't understand that. It blows my mind. I mean, I fall victim to it all the time too. I mean, I think letting young people know, like, I mean, I have negative self-talk with literally everything that I do. I mean, even getting on this podcast, it's like, what authority do I have? Like, well, why is everybody like, you know what I mean? So like, even subconsciously, I think we all have thoughts like that in everything that we do. But I want to be clear with them, is they have this overwhelming fear of failure is the number one negative self-talk that I hear. But just constantly reminding them that I fail every single day. I fail every day in my faith. I fail every day in my marriage, and as being a speaker, I fail every day as a daughter, as all the things. We fail every single day, but failure is so important to growth, right? It's so cliche to say it, but I think that failure gives us feedback into what is appropriate or not for us to continue to lean into. So that's one of the things I talk about, is acting, assessing, adjusting, and reminding students that our life is a GPS route 100%. And I always ask them, I'm like, so you set a GPS on your phone. So what happens if you turn left when you're supposed to go right? And they're like, well, Siri course corrects. I'm like, absolutely, friend. So your life is not over if you take a left turn versus a right. And I think that that's really big for them, is they want to get into this college. They want to do well on this test. So I'm just challenging them. I'm like, what's going to happen if you do fail that test? What's going to happen if you don't get into that college? Oh, guess what? You're going to be okay. Like, you're going to be fine. Like, life will go on. And, kind of letting them know that. But truly, again, with being the vulnerable, like, yeah, I have negative self-talk all the time. But again, we may not be able to control it, but we can choose how we respond to it. We have control over that. So it can either stop you from doing things like getting on stage. Eric, I tell these students all the time, like, you don't think every time I step on stage, I'm wondering, why did they bring me here? I can't believe they're paying me to do this. Someone else could definitely do this. But how I choose to respond to it is I get up there anyway, right? Like, just do the things, right? And especially if it is healthy and it serves you, because sometimes we don't do things because, again, we're afraid of being judged. We feel like we're not good enough. We're not qualified. But how will we know unless we do the things? And I think that negative self-talk is something that we're just again, we have choices how we respond to it. I don't believe it ever goes away, to be honest. I think that we can constantly work to make it quieter, in our brain. And again, show yourself the love that you so freely give to other people. Why can we say, girl, you look amazing in that dress, amazing, and praise other people, but we can't look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, you look amazing today because, oh, that's boastful. Oh gosh. Oh, you got an ego on you. No, why don't you just own the fact that you look fabulous today? So it's just constantly reminding people that's okay to do that. So
I love that. I love that mindset. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. It is funny. I think every pastor can probably, if they're honest, would relate to what you just said. I say this all the time. I'm like, every time I do a speaking event or I'm preaching at a church or whatever, those thoughts go through my mind. And so I think it's built into our DNA and our human nature. But when you realize that God uses you despite your sin, despite your weakness, and it's really just being a conduit of the Holy Spirit to allow him to work through you, holy cow. There are times I've preached sermons and I told the church, I'm like, even if nobody showed up today, I would still be here giving this message because it's really for me. Like, I needed this more than any of you did. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Let's wrap up with this. What resources do you find to be most helpful in making sense of mental health, in helping combat mental health? I know you have some on your website, so I'll give the plug. Go to BrittanyRichmond.com, get her book when it comes out. What other things are there that you would recommend?
Truly, if teenagers are listening, you have resources at your schools, at your churches, you have counselors at your fingertips. I know that everything is stopping you. You feel like there's a wall. Like, I don't want to go in that office. I don't want to talk about this. There's something wrong with me. I was like, no, friends, I encourage you to take that step into that space because you're going to learn a lot about yourself and it's just going to really just level you up. And it's going to be changing. I mean, therapy is cool. Let's make therapy famous, just like we're trying to make Jesus famous again. Okay. Just saying, let's make it a real thing. And, as far as like the adults listening and the pastors, because we're not immune to this. And I think that pastors carry a heavy load trying to lead a church and, make sure that, they're called by God to step up and, let the Lord's words flow through them. And I believe there's probably a lot of pressure to that in a lot of different ways. And just to give yourself grace in this process too, because you were called to do this and the people that, need to hear your message, hear it. And so I encourage all the pastors listening to do what I do before I step on stage, which is to silently say to myself, Lord, let the words flow through me that they need to hear, not the ones that I want to say, as a constant reminder that, you are a conduit for him. And we're all grateful for everything that y'all do regardless. So yeah, that's awesome. That's probably what I'd say.
Amen. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. This topic, I'm sure we could do 15 more episodes on. It is something that for many, if you're wrestling with this, it feels daunting. It feels overwhelming. But look for those and moments. Take hope. Ask for help. Those are kind of some of the themes that we've been talking about here. I love what you just said, even about like finding counseling. Don't be afraid. You're not alone. I think when you look at the whole of Scripture, even to go all the way back to the beginning of this conversation in our rapid fire questions, and you were talking about all the times that in Scripture it says, do not be afraid. That's probably there for a reason. It's almost like God knew what he was doing and how much we would fear. Yeah. In the New Testament, all over it's do not be anxious. Yeah, bring your request to him. So, yeah, Brittany, thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm super grateful that I was able to. And I'm grateful for all the listeners because I recognize you could have done anything else with this hour and you chose to show up and listen to us talk. And I'm grateful for that. So,
all right. When's the book come out?
March 12th, I believe. So let's go.
Can't wait. All right, I'm getting a copy. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank
Lord.
you to our listeners. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope you found it to be valuable. And if you did, would you share it with someone else in your network who might enjoy it? Also, would you please go on and subscribe, rate, and review it? That way you don't miss any more and somebody else will be able to find it too. Also, because we want to be your trusted resource, if you have a question or topic that you would like us to discuss on an upcoming episode, send that to us via email to info@buildmomentum.org, or you can send us a DM on any of our social media platforms. You can find us there at Momentum Ministry Partners. Also, if you need more information on our ministry, be sure to check out our website at buildmomentum.org. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next time.